Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we uncover the leadership life hacks that help you to experience breakout performance faster and rocket to success. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I think we're going to have an incredible discussion to talk about how the entire customer experience from that very front end all the way to hopefully the perpetual experience that is positive can actually be made. Ty Montague was born in Carrollton, Georgia, and raised primarily in Albuquerque, New Mexico. His dad was a university professor and his mom was a community organizer. Ty has 2 siblings, a brother Tim and a sister Jessica. Ty was a self-described nerd and a bookworm growing up. He loved reading about a wide variety of topics, especially science fiction fantasy, anything about troublemakers and renegades. But he had no clue what he wanted to do with his life. He did a wide variety of jobs in high school, and during those years, he would have been found not in college because he actually dropped out of high school and college. He worked in an ice factory and in construction. He worked as a raft guide and a mechanic. He learned to make and occasionally race kayaks. Ty would be the first to acknowledge that by most measures, it was a fairly inauspicious start, but things took a turn. On a whim, Ty moved to New York in his early 20s, where he worked as a bartender. One fateful day, Ty met someone sitting across from him at the bar who told him he should consider looking for a job in advertising. From that chance encounter, Ty discovered one of his life's passions, the business of molding culture and ideas. In advertising, Ty's job was to have ideas and figure out how to make those ideas into films and experiences that were funny or moving or smart. Things that changed the way people look at their world. Ty was lucky enough to work at some of the legendary ad agencies under legendary creative leaders. Ty was lucky enough to work on some of the world's biggest brands and businesses. On the surface, Ty's career was going great, but there was something important stirring beneath that surface. And as his ad career boomed, Ty began to notice that there was a dark side to it all. He began to see some of the negative effects the ad business was having on culture and the world's obsessions with overconsumption, disconnection from the Earth's natural systems and from each other, depression, anxiety, etc. Ty also began to notice that it was pretty easy for a company to tell one story and do a very different story. He decided he had to try to do something about that, so he dropped out again. Only this time, he left the ad business and started his own company dedicated to solving the problem. Ty and his partners Rosemary Ryan and Neil Parker founded Co-Collective in 2010. Co-Collective is a creative and strategic transformation partner for purpose-led businesses. Co works with leadership teams to help them to define and align on their higher purpose and to bring that purpose to life through innovation in the customer experience. The Co team has been fortunate to work with some of the most inspiring and progressive organizations and business leaders in the world, including Google, YouTube, LinkedIn, IBM, MetLife, Puma, Microsoft, the ACLU, MoMA, Infinity, Capital One, and Under Armour. Ty currently lives in New York City. Actually, he still lives in New York City. And he's here to help us all get over the hump. Are you ready to help us do that, Ty?
I am, Jim. Thank you for that kind introduction. It's really great to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you. Now, I've given my Legion a little bit about you, but can you share what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Sure. My current passion is reinventing capitalism as we know it. And that sounds probably pretty highfalutin to your audience. And so I owe you a little bit of detail on that, if you'll indulge me. I want to start out by saying I am a capitalist at heart. I believe in the capitalist system and all of the good things that have flowed from it. You know, capitalism as a system has been it's been a beacon that has attracted more creativity. It has unleashed more innovation. It has created more upward mobility than any system in the history of the world. The one small problem is that if carried to its ultimate extreme, at least as it's currently conceived of, it leaves the earth a smoking and uninhabitable cinder. And if we were to blame somebody for this, this version of capitalism, it's a man named Milton Friedman, who in the 1970s said the purpose of a corporation is to maximize profits. And this was a new idea in the 1970s. Previously, corporations had thought more about stakeholders and community and their responsibility to the world overall. Milton Friedman said, no, it's all about profitability. This became religion at the big business schools, and it is now the way we think about the purpose of a corporation. This means a lot of bad behavior, though, on the part of corporations. They have a tendency to externalize costs, right? So if there's pollution that they're putting into the environment, they don't want to have to pay for that. It causes them to create policies that are not positive for employees, for people who work inside companies, because that's not really part of making the most profitable enterprise you can. And they tend to ignore their responsibilities around community. And obviously, I'm painting with a broad brush here. This is not all companies, but this is the average company. And, just looking around the world today, we face a rising tide of problems. We have climate change, we have income inequality, we have, culture wars going on between various factions in the country, growing mistrust of institutions. And if you believe Milton Friedman, he kind of gave corporations a pass on all of those problems. He basically said, none of that is your problem. You just have to produce profits. Fortunately, though, this has begun to change. Lately, I don't know if you are familiar with the Business Roundtable, but it's basically an organization that is the 200 CEOs of the top, 200 corporations in the world from a size standpoint are members. They recently produced a letter, an open letter that they published in the newspaper saying that the purpose of a corporation needed to change, that corporations needed to begin to take responsibility for not only shareholders, but also stakeholders. And then another big influence here has been the CEO of an organization called BlackRock, a man named Larry Fink. And BlackRock is a purely capitalist organization. They manage trillions of dollars worth of investor money. And they came out recently and said they would not invest in a company unless it's able to articulate its broader societal purpose. It's either environmental or the positive or environmental or social change that they're trying to make. And this is a sea change in the way that companies think about themselves. And, I saw this starting to happen about 10 years ago when I was in the advertising business. And it is what led me to actually leave that business and put my shoulder to the wheel using the company that I started called Co-Collective, to put my shoulder against this wheel and to try to move capitalism in a more positive, inclusive direction. And so, that was a huge change for me in my life, and I couldn't be happier that I made it, but it was a tough decision.
Well, as you were talking, I start pulling out some of the things that I have been part of for the past couple of decades, working within organizations in the customer service area, the customer experience area. And for me, as you're talking, I'm like, well, that's who we are. I mean, we are the people that, want to have a purpose, that care for others, that want to solve people's problems, and often find a disconnect, when we are trying to do those things. And then we have an organization that is, saying or having metrics in place that are preventing us from doing that. And I still remember this conversation I had with an executive VP of an organization where they were talking about reallocating the responsibilities for different parts of the business for their company. And he said none of the senior executives wanted the contact center, customer service, to be under their area of responsibility. And quote, he said, because those people are weird.
That is bananas. I mean, that is bananas. I think this is one of the unforeseen outcomes of Milton Friedman's thinking is that executives often forget where the rubber meets the road, and that ultimately the customer experience is all a company has in terms of creating a brand on a long-term business, and lavishing more attention on it, not less, is the key to success. One of the things that we've done at Co is we've done a study actually of companies that we characterize in the old way. We call them storytellers, and companies that are actually acting in this new way. They have a purpose that transcends creating shareholder value, and they put that service into action throughout their entire customer experience. And we looked at 50 different publicly traded companies in 7 different commercial categories, all of the big ones: airlines, automotive, media and entertainment, retail, etc. And we ranked the storytelling companies and the story doing companies. And it turns out there are tremendous business advantages to being a purpose-led business. The companies are growing faster. Story doing companies, purpose-led businesses, are growing faster. They're more than twice as likely to be perceived by consumers as being innovative and future forward, thinking about the future. They care more about their customers and employees, or at least their customers and employees say that they feel more cared about. And that's kind of what you're talking about, is once you get, if a company has a really clear purpose and they get it authentically enacted throughout their entire business. In other words, the frontline employees, the people in the customer service centers, feel like the metrics that they are being asked to hit are in line with that higher purpose. Those employees are happier, and they stay longer, and they give better customer service. It's not brain surgery, but it's surprising how few companies actually really understand this.
Okay, so what if, let's just say they start understanding it, because as you just very clearly was able to state, that the data proves it to be true, right? But we still have a problem with execution, and that's where a lot of organizations fall short. It's where they stumble. It's my intent, versus getting down to the point to where it's my outcome, is in that alignment, and it's hopefully surprising, but ultimately what I expect, meaning that it's positive. So you talk about storytelling versus story doing. Take us off over the bridge. How do I get from telling to doing?
Well, so this is the essence of our work at Co. As I said, I used to be in the advertising business, and in the advertising business, the word story was often thought of as a word that was not a real business term. It was a fluffy term that lived in the marketing department, and no one else in the business really cared about it. And our thesis as a business at Co is that there is nothing more important throughout the organization than the story that the organization has, your quest. What is the mission, that the higher purpose that you serve in the world has got to infuse the entire organization. And so we lavish attention on getting the entire leadership team, up to and including the CEO, whenever possible, engaged in creating and defining and aligning on what we call the quest. Like, what is this? What is the higher purpose that you serve as a business? And then our second thesis as a business is your quest, once you have it, isn't something like, you're not done. It's not something that you take and put in a desk drawer somewhere or carve on the wall in your lobby. It becomes a tool that you put to work inside your business, using it to actually define your internal policies. What do you celebrate and reward internally as a result of your quest? What do you give promotions on the basis of that ties to your quest? And then externally, what other aspects of your customer experience would you change now that this is your quest? So, your quest should inform the products that you make in some cases, the services that you provide, in some cases your business model. It should certainly inform the way that you think about and enact customer service. And then ultimately, it might also impact communication. We're not anti-communication or anti-advertising at Co. We just don't believe in starting there. You have to start with action, and everyone inside the company needs to feel like they understand the purpose and that they're an owner of it. In other words, that they can enact it in their area of the company. And, I've just been through some of the business advantages of operating that way. There are a couple of others. Once you begin to get it right, and this is the carrot for executives, story doing companies have a higher percentage of people who would recommend the company to a friend. They get many more mentions in social media than traditional storytelling companies. And remarkably, they achieve all of these advantages, these business metrics, despite spending much less money in paid media. So they don't actually have to advertise as much. And that's because they've created a level of loyalty because they're on, a quest. They're trying to do something positive. They've created a level of engagement and loyalty among employees and customers that causes their customers to and employees to become evangelists. And that allows them to reduce their ad spend. So that all that money can just drop right to the bottom line.
Oh, but even as you're talking, and talking about the whole execution piece and the feeling, the connection, the emotion, all of those things that are associated with what we're talking about, I start thinking about all of those layers in between. And so even though I may have this intent and this intention and this purpose and this directive and this quest, that has been, part of what we've created, I have to go through a bunch of different managers. And when you start looking at that whole employee engagement component, one of the largest contributors of whether or not those employees are engaged is their direct supervisor, their direct boss, the person who they're reporting to. The numbers are shocking. It's like 80%.
Yeah.
So how can I ensure that all of this work that we're doing is not getting blocked by that person who is responsible for overseeing those that have to actually execute all of this?
Well, you have to set metrics for that boss. You have to make sure that the metrics that you've set for people, for managers, as well as frontline employees are in line with one another. In other words, if the manager has been tasked with nothing more than let's say, and now I'm outside of my area of personal expertise, but and into yours. So correct me if I'm wrong. If your manager has said your job is to get everybody off the phone within 2 minutes, but the company's stated public purpose is to provide excellence in customer service no matter what, there's a dissonance there that employees feel. They feel they're being told one thing and measured in another way. And so getting those two things in line, figuring out what are the KPIs around the quest, what are we going to measure beyond profitability or efficiency? What are the softer measures that we're going for, are vitally important. And just at the level of making sure that everybody's being honest, instituting 360-degree reviews is a good way to kind of ferret out the people who are true believers, and really celebrate them, and find the people who are not true believers or who are not really enacting the behavior that you're hoping for inside the organization, and ultimately showing them the door. Because nothing will degrade someone's trust or engagement in an enterprise faster than this inauthenticity or this misalignment of word and deed.
Well, and as you're talking, I think that's one of the things that often I find a big struggle and disconnect with is the development of that frontline supervisor. So we can't just give them a KPI that they're now accountable for, that they have to essentially hit. We have to develop their abilities and skills to be able to deliver upon that person from a leadership perspective. And when you start thinking about leadership development, a lot of organizations, they'll spend it at the very top thinking that it's going to have a trickle-down effect. That doesn't just not happen. I even had a conversation with somebody the other week about this whole developing of their frontline leaders, because I have a leadership academy called Call Center Coach. It's a virtual academy. And he goes to me, he goes, how am I going to be able to sell it to my CFO that we need to be able to invest in that when I am hitting my KPIs? And I'm like, how do you answer that?
Well, I mean, I would, if I were engaged with that company, I would make sure that the CFO had signed off on those KPIs and had agreed that they were not nice to haves, they were must haves. In other words, you have to believe ultimately that you're creating a more sustainable, durable, and profitable organization if you're creating an environment that is going to keep your frontline employees feeling engaged and happy. And if you don't believe that, I guess this is back to my belief at Co-Collective. If you don't believe the logic train that I just laid out, you're going to get left behind as a company, because the most progressive and successful companies today follow that logic train. Create a good environment, make sure that everybody is aligned, measure everybody in a fair and transparent way, and make sure that the people who are being managed have as much of a say in the review of a manager as that manager's boss does. In other words, make sure that you're getting voices heard throughout the business. And the best run businesses today do that. And, there are companies who are not doing that, who I believe are not going to be around for very much longer. I really honestly believe that this is a sea change.
I see that myself. Now, I really like the way that you talk about the logic train. I mean, that makes sense to me. One of the things, though, I have to ask you about is, and because this is part of the dialogue and discussion that I will often have, especially when it comes to metrics. So, for those that may not have been aware, I worked for an academic, and we measured the customer experience, and I did that for 15 years. And so I've groomed into the analytics and all that, and the understanding of analytics. And I used to, and I still do say, if you think something is a soft metric, I said the reason is because you don't know how to measure it. That's the problem. Because every metric can be turned into something that is extremely tangible. So a lot of times the whole people elements from a KPI perspective, and you even said it, something about soft measures. But really, I mean, are they really soft? Because to me, when you start talking about the action or the storytellers versus the story doers, some may perceive, oh, that's all the soft metric stuff. No, you just made them tangible and very hard.
No, I totally agree with that. And thank you for calling me out for that. I think that's awesome. I did use that term, and I don't mean that term. I don't like that term. I don't like the term soft metrics because of that. There are all these things that, so-called business people think of as fluffy. Story is one of them. Employee engagement is another one. They kind of think of these things as being nice to haves, but not must haves in a really grown up and serious capitalist endeavor. And nothing could be further from the truth. It's the people stuff that will determine outcome far more than anything else inside the company. And I think people are beginning to wake up to that. I think young job seekers are also really beginning to drive change here. Like if and I'm speaking now to the leadership of companies, if you think you are going to win the war for the next generation of talent doing things in the old way, you are fooling yourself. Your competitors who have a more enlightened and progressive attitude toward the environment that they create for the employees that they have are going to beat you.
Most definitely. So I would dare to say the whole concepts and what I would call in that vein, corporate arrogance will be your demise.
Totally agree. I completely agree.
Well, I mean, we know that a lot of what we've been talking about the story, the action, the impact, the loyalty. I mean, it's just loaded with emotion. And one of the things that we do to help us keep us pointed in the right direction on the Fast Leader Show is point to quotes that inspire us. Is there a quote or two that you like that you can share?
Sure. One of my favorite quotes is one from Winston Churchill, who said, "The secret to success is moving from failure to failure with undiminished enthusiasm." And the reason that I love that quote is that I think that is the definition of if you can enact that in your organization, and I mean really enact it as opposed to just say it. If you can create an organization that values enthusiastic engagement even when things go wrong, you will create a very durable and formidable organization. It's organizations where when things go wrong, that people get down and feel defeated, or get told to feel down, get told that they failed, get told that they have to fix things. That is a short-lived strategy. Like, that's a strategy for failure, not success, I think.
Well, and even as you're saying that, I'm starting to think about times where we do, essentially fall off that, that horse, that train, logic train, because we do get sidetracked. And there are humps, humps that we have to get over, times where we're like, I wish that wouldn't have happened, but it did, and now I've learned from it.
That's right.
To the next thing with hopefully some enthusiasm. Is there a time where you've gotten over a hump like that you can share?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as you in your excellent introduction pointed out, that I had a whole career in advertising before I got into getting into the more what we would characterize as business transformation business. And in the advertising business, I had some success. I spent 15 years in it, and my last job in it was running the North American operations of an advertising agency called J. Walter Thompson. And I did that job for about 5 years, and we were having a great time. We had turned the company around. We were winning awards. We were getting recognition in our industry. And during this time, I was beginning to realize that everything was great except I hated it. And I found, the day-to-day activities of just trying to push the ball forward for businesses and get people to consume more stuff was just not satisfying. And it just seemed to me to be adding to the problems in the world as opposed to trying to solve some of the problems in the world. And so even though I was having a great run, it became obvious that I was either going to have to push those voices in my head down, or I was going to have to listen to them. And ultimately, and this was my kind of epiphany around this, was, as I thought about it, the only thing scarier to me than failing if I was going to jump out and start my own business, the only thing scarier to me than that was the thought of spending the rest of my life being unhappy as a, quote, success. And that epiphany for me was when I knew I had to make the leap and leave a business that I had a great time in, and some of my best friends are still in it, but try something new and try to make some positive change in the lives of everyone who either works at a company or is a customer of a company,
Well, even as you're saying that, I'm starting to think about that person who is, in an organization, and they are that, sea of change, and they don't feel like they're in alignment with the organization, kind of like that executive VP who said, well, they're all weird, well, it's, hey, all those weird ones, that, part of the reason that we stay at a particular job is because of the people we work with, right?
Yes.
But it's, how do I actually say, hey, I don't necessarily want to leave. I want to help be part of this transformation to something that is more meaningful, impactful. What would you say to that person?
Well, I would say to that person, you have to honestly assess your ability to affect change around you inside the organization. Are you in an organization that is open to and interested in your point of view on how the organization can be better, or are you in an organization that kind of pays lip service to that concept as when you bring them new ideas and then goes back to business as usual? If it's the latter, I'm sad to say you should probably leave that organization, honestly, if you can, because that management style is very hard to change, and it's extremely hard to change from people who are on the front lines. It's easier to change. You need enlightened leaders to change a culture like that, and if you don't have them, you're going to have a really hard time. So sadly, I would say move on. The good news is there are more and more companies that are rethinking this whole way of being in the world. There are a lot of new leaders, startups, mid-sized companies, and even some big ones that are really rethinking their purpose in the world and trying to listen and react to their workforce in an entirely new way. And so there are more and more places for someone like that to go that are already, I would say, more fertile territory, for people who really want to have an impact where they work, no matter what kind of layer they're working in.
So I would dare to say, kind of like what you have really gone through, is talking about, a journey of realization. Going back from those early days. Even I found very interesting, and maybe you can shed some light on this as well, because I think we often, talking about changing capitalism, I think it's changing, individuals within our society, and when we look at what success is or really could be. Now, looking at your background, when you start talking about, not really sure about the education component, not completing this, that, and the other, we would look at someone like you and say, you're going to be dropping out of society as a whole. You're not going to make it, right?
Yep.
We may medicate you. We may, put you in special and give you some type of designation that you have some deficiency,
Absolutely.
Why did that not happen, Ty? You have to really help me understand this and how we need to rethink, people who don't necessarily fit into our very precious.
That's very interesting. Yeah. I've thought a lot about that myself, because you're right. By any normal metric, if I'd handed you a resume that said high school dropped out, college dropped out, you would, throw my resume in the wastebasket, right? I happened to find a business, the advertising business, that is, and to be specific, I was a creative person in advertising. So I was a copywriter. And I found one of those intake vents to an organization that was an absolute meritocracy. They did not care where you'd gone to school. They didn't care what you knew how to do. If you knew how to make an ad that felt compelling and creative and funny, if you knew how to do that, you were good. And so, I think, honestly, just to build on where you started with this, I think that's a very interesting model for all organizations. Like, I do honestly believe that, in amongst all of the other things that are changing, the way we think about education needs to change, because there are people with hidden talents that we overlook because they don't appear in their CV, that they haven't gotten the certification for it. And running your organization more like a meritocracy and finding the people who can do a thing and then letting them run when they can do it, I think is much needed. And that's another thing that I hope is happening more in the world.
Well, I appreciate you elaborating on that a little bit. However, I think it's important to focus in on what you said was important, right? Okay. Yep. So if we start talking about this audacious goal of redefining and changing capitalism, I am sure that you have a lot of things that you'd like to focus in on and goals that are part of that train, right? If you could, tell us what one of those are.
Well, I do. It's two things that are two sides of kind of the same coin. So if you follow the logic that organizations, it's now become clear, 10 years ago when I started Co, it was a little less common to talk about a purpose-led organization. But now, because of some of the things I talked about before, because of the Business Roundtable, because of Larry Fink, these have now become much more mainstream ideas. Many companies now are thinking about what their purpose should be. And I think that we're now, paradoxically or ironically in a way, in a place where almost purpose washing is the new danger, where you have a company that's developed a purpose, they will talk about their purpose, but do they actually believe it, and are they actually enacting it? And so I am working on the creation of what I call the Authenticity Index, a way to rank and score businesses based on their, what they say their stated purpose is, and then the degree to which they are actually walking that talk, and then assigning those companies a score, which hopefully will be a tool not only for consumers, it can be a tool for potential employees. It can be a tool for investors to know where to put their money. And ultimately, it should be a tool for leadership teams, because now they've got a number to manage against. At least they'll know if they want to raise their score, these are the things that they have to change about their organization in order to become more authentic. And, back to KPIs matter, and the right KPIs can be massively helpful. And so that's a project that I'm working on that I'm very passionate about. And then I also am working on, don't have it, it's not published yet, but maybe I'll come back and talk to you about it one day when it is. But I would like to start a podcast called, right now it's got a kind of working title, which is BS. And the reason we call it BS is because at Co, one of the things that we do is we help companies define not only their quest, but we help them define an enemy. What are they fighting against? What is the dragon that they're getting out of bed every day to slay? We put ourselves through our own process at Co, and the enemy that we defined for ourselves was BS. But we define BS as the delta between word and deed inside an organization. And so I'd like to do a podcast. I'm working on recording a podcast that is devoted to, talking about companies and where they rank, and whether they are, how authentic they actually are, whether they are walking their talk or not.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. An Even Better Place to Work is an easy-to-use solution that gives you a continuous diagnostic on employee engagement, along with integrated activities that will improve employee engagement and leadership skills in everyone. Using this award-winning solution is guaranteed to create motivated, productive, and loyal employees who have great work relationships with their colleagues and your customers. To learn more about An Even Better Place to Work, visit beyondmorale.com/better. All right.
Thank you.
Here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Ty, the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust, yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Ty Montague, are you ready to hoe down?
I'm ready to hoe down.
So what is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
I would say my passion. Sometimes if you get super passionate about a thing, you can run down a path and turn around and there's nobody behind you. And that's the opposite of being a leader. And so I have to be careful about not getting too passionate too fast about things that don't matter to anybody else.
And what is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Be curious and spend less time talking, more time listening.
And what do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
Pain tolerance. I'm willing to do things that most people are not willing to do.
And what do you believe is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
Introversion. I am a dyed-in-the-wool introvert, and it has held me in good stead.
And what is one book you'd recommend to our Legion? And it could be from any genre.
Reimagining Capitalism in a World on Fire by Rebecca Henderson.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Ty Montague. Okay, Ty, this is my last hump day on question. Imagine you've been given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25 and you can take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you. But you can't take it all. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you and why?
Public speaking. That was completely underemphasized in the parts of education that I actually participated in. And I realized much later that it's a vital skill. Had I known it earlier, I would have gone much farther.
I had fun with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
You can hit me on Instagram at tmontague or tmontague@cocollective.com. And I would love to hear from any and all of you.
Ty Montague, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and the Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.